On the morning of June 30th, 1908, the people of rural Siberia woke to a sight they would never forget. The sun had barely risen when a blazing fireball tore across the sky. Witnesses described it as brighter than the sun itself, trailing a long plume of smoke and fire. Some thought it was a piece of the heavens falling. Others feared it was the end of the world. At 7:17 a.m., the sky exploded. The shockwave was immediate. A thunderous boom echoed across the vast Siberian wilderness, followed by a blast of heat so intense it seared the ground. The force of the explosion flattened more than 80 million trees, fanning outward in a radial pattern across 800 square miles. Herds of reindeer were incinerated where they stood. Villagers were knocked off their feet, roofs ripped from houses, windows shattered. Even hundreds of miles away, the earth trembled. This was the Tunguska Event, an explosion estimated to be 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. But it happened in 1908, nearly 4 decades before the atomic age began, and it happened in one of the most remote, uninhabited corners of the world. Remarkably, despite the unimaginable devastation, there were no confirmed human deaths. The region was so sparsely populated that only scattered communities felt its fury. One man living 40 miles from ground zero recalled being thrown from his chair by a sudden blast of hot wind. Another described seeing the sky split in two before a wave of fire rushed overhead. And yet, for all its power, the Tunguska explosion left behind no crater. That is what makes this event so mysterious. In 1908, the Russian Empire was vast, and Siberia was its most isolated frontier. News of the explosion traveled slowly. With no telegraphs or rail lines connecting the region, it took weeks before the event was even reported in major cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg. By then, most of the world had already moved on, dismissing the strange stories from Siberian peasants as exaggeration. But nature itself carried the evidence across continents. In the days that followed the explosion, strange glowing skies were reported throughout Europe and even across the Atlantic. In London, people were able to read their newspapers at midnight without artificial light. In New York, skies glowed a strange, silvery blue. Scientific instruments recorded shockwaves circling the globe multiple times. Whatever had happened in Siberia, it was powerful enough to affect the entire planet. The most widely accepted explanation is that a small asteroid or comet entered Earth's atmosphere and exploded in midair, releasing its energy before impact. Scientists estimate the object was around 150 to 200 feet across, not large enough to survive entry, but massive enough to unleash a blast of 15 megatons of TNT. That's 1,000 times stronger than the bomb that leveled Hiroshima. Had it struck a major city, the result would have been catastrophic. London, Paris, New York, all could have been completely wiped off the map. But the asteroid theory, while convincing, is not without problems. Despite decades of investigation, no fragments have ever been recovered. No crater was ever found. The ground zero site shows scorched trees, flattened in a perfect radial pattern, but the soil and rocks revealed no evidence of an impact. Some scientists argue the object could have been a fragile comet, a mass of ice and gas that vaporized entirely before reaching the ground. Others suggest the angle of entry was so shallow that the body disintegrated before impact, but those theories haven't stopped stranger ideas from taking hold. Over the years, the Tunguska event has fueled speculation that goes far beyond asteroids and comets. One theory suggests a massive release of natural gas from beneath the Earth, suddenly ignited, creating the massive explosion. Another posits that antimatter, particles that annihilate normal matter on contact, somehow collided with our planet, though there is little evidence to support it. Perhaps the most sensational theory is that it was the crash of an alien spacecraft. Proponents point to the absence of a crater and the strange pattern of tree destruction as evidence of something controlled rather than natural. While mainstream science rejects this explanation, the lack of concrete proof keeps such theories alive in the popular imagination. It wasn't until 1927, nearly 20 years after the blast, that a scientific team led by Leonid Kulik finally reached the Tunguska site. What they found astonished them. Trees were flattened outward in a giant circle, pointing away from the epicenter like matchsticks knocked over by a tremendous hand. At the very center, however, the trees remained standing stripped bare of their branches, like ghostly totems in a dead forest. Kulik expected to find a crater, but there was none. No fragments of rock, no meteorite, nothing but devastation. His expedition returned with photographs and samples, but few answers. Over the following decades, More expeditions followed, yet the mystery remained. Today, most scientists agree that the Tunguska event was a cosmic near miss, a reminder of how vulnerable Earth is to the random debris of space. Modern simulations suggest the object likely entered the atmosphere at about 40,000 miles per hour before exploding in a massive airburst 5 miles above the ground. The force released was greater than any nuclear weapon humans would build for decades to come, and it struck without warning, in a place so remote that the rest of the world barely noticed. But what if it hadn't? If the Tunguska event had happened over Moscow, London, or New York, millions could have died instantly. Cities would have been reduced to ash in seconds. Civilization itself might have been altered forever. It is unsettling to realize that Tunguska was not unique. Earth has been struck many times throughout its history, sometimes by objects large enough to wipe out species. The question is not if it will happen again, but when. The Tunguska event remains the largest explosion in recorded human history, an event that destroyed forests, rattled the skies, and puzzled generations of scientists, but perhaps its greatest significance lies in the warning it offers. Our planet travels through a crowded solar system, and the same skies that provide light and warmth can also deliver sudden destruction. In 1908, we were lucky. The blast struck a wilderness instead of a city. Next time, we may not be so fortunate. If you've enjoyed diving into this mystery on the Real Strange channel, don't forget to hit the like button, it really helps. And if you want more strange and fascinating stories from history, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one.